Darkness Ablaze is the third Pokemon Sword and Shield set in the Pokemon trading card game. The feature Pokemon of the set was Charizard, and of course everybody knows Charizard is like the biggest deal in the Pokemon trading card game, but it was kind of underwhelming here, which is actually okay because there were some real heavy hitters that carried the slack for Charizard in the set. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's talk about the best cards from Darkness Ablaze. We have to start this whole thing off with Eternatus VMAX. This was the card of the set where it has the ability Eternal Zone, where if all of your Pokemon are dark Pokemon, you can have up to 8 Pokemon on your bench. And this paired nicely with the move Dread End, where for only 2 energy, it does 30 damage for each of your dark Pokemon in play. If you are able to get the bench filled with 8, you are doing 270 damage, which was absolutely bonkers. I believe at the time that was enough to take 3 prizes and 1-hit KO a tag team. And this was one of, if not the most popular deck for quite some time. That being said, yeah, two energy hitting for 270 damage, absolutely nuts. However, the Eternatus deck can be a little bricky because in order to get 8 Pokemon on the bench, you have to have a lot of basic Pokemon, and it's hard to get the perfect start of Eternatus in the active, and you're running a whole bunch of stuff to try and keep Eternatus in the active. And then later on, they would introduce cards like Avery and Path to the Peak that really hurt the viability of Eternatus going forward. But for the time being, at the time of its launch, Eternatus was the king. We also cannot forget Crobat V, which is one of the most important cards in the entire Sword and Shield era with its ability Dark Asset. Once you put it on your bench, you can draw up to 6 cards. It was sort of like a different take on the Dene GX, and regardless, it worked a little different, but it was still one of the best draw supporter cards in the game, where so many decks have at least one of these, and sometimes even 2. All right, we got to talk about Charizard. It was, yes, the featured Pokemon of this set, and at the time, it might not have been as bad as it is now, because there were cards like Welder and Giant Hearth that made it a little easier to cover the cost of Gmax Wildfire. However, for 5 energy to attack for 300, it was just really difficult to reach those numbers. And plus, you were discarding 2 energy on top of that. Really made Charizard not particularly playable for the most part. Now, Charizard VMAX kind of had a second wind with Arceus, where you could do your Trinity Nova onto Charizard, and then you just slap a double turbo energy onto Charizard to get Gmax Wildfire to hit for 280, and then you just attach another double turbo to keep attacking for 280, which was enough to knock out V-Stars. So it's not the worst VMAX, and I do have a soft spot in my heart for it. I have multiple deck videos featuring this card, including a Lost Zone version that I'm personally really proud of. But Charizard VMAX was mostly a collector card, and even then, it's not a gold version, it's not a rainbow version, it's not the shiny version that would come out in Shining Fates later. Scorch VMAX was very popular at the time from a competitive standpoint because of its move Gmax. Centiferno does 40 damage plus 40 for each fire energy attached to this Pokemon, and when you attack with it, you can attach more energy. And Welder made this card pretty good. I was gonna say I remember, but I wasn't playing like at the time of Scorch's Apex. I came in around the tail end of Battle Styles, but I remember hearing stories about Scorch and how certain people really loved this deck, but by the time I started playing, it was already falling off, and not long after, just completely disappeared. A card that hasn't disappeared though, and if anything, is only hitting its prime right now, Vikavolt V. Thanks to its move, Paralyzing Bolt for 50 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, they can't play any item cards next turn. Such an annoying effect. of an attack. Cannot stand it. Choice Belt made this even better. Now you're hitting for 80 damage. And Vikavolt is very much living large in the Lost Zone days because of being able to shut down stuff like the Comphase and the Lost Zone engine, which rely heavily on items. But a lot of decks rely on items, and Vikavolt can shut that down and at the very least make it super annoying for its opponents. The big single prize deck to come out of Darkness Ablaze was the Mad Party deck. I'm not going to show all the cards, but the big gimmick was that you would get more damage for getting more cards with the move Mad Party in your discard pile. So you're trying to throw out a whole bunch of cards and then keep some of the big ones that do the most damage, including this Poltegeist right here. As you can see, its HP is really low and all of the Mad Party cards have very low HP, but these could hit for massive damage if you got enough of the cards into your discard pile, particularly towards the end of the game. Now, this kind of saw a second wind with the Pokemon Go set because of Ditto being able to copy the moves, but it still wasn't enough to make the Mad Party deck competitively viable in the same way as some of the other decks on this list. Hoopa was a little bit of a late bloomer. It has the move Assault Gate, where if this Pokemon didn't move from the bench, if this Pokemon didn't move from the bench to the active spot this turn, this attack does nothing. So when you move it from the bench to the active, you could attack for 90 right away. It's not bad. You could use it to take out a Sobble or something in the active, but this card really came to prominence during the Fusion Strike era. And I know you're not hitting for weakness here, but it would get paired with Galarian Moltres, and there's this like new era of decks where you're trying to do chip damage and then you're building up so that you can get massive hits with Moltres at the end. Very cool deck concepts. I cannot stand fighting them, and I sure as heck have no idea how to play this style of deck well, but this gameplay concept continues to live on with like Lost Zone Box, and instead of Hoopa Moltres, it's Cramorant and Sableye. This little Rowlet right here actually kind of had some competitive viability, particularly in 2022, where this was paired up in some Urshifu Moltres decks or certain decks where you would use the ability Sky Circus, where if you play Birdkeeper from your hand during this turn, you ignored all energy costs of this move. And so what you would do is you'd use Birdkeeper, put the Rowlet on, and then you would snipe something like a Dunsparce or a Sobble for a quick single prize. The big card from this ended up being Decidueye, and it had the ability Deep Force Camo, where you could prevent all damage done to this Pokemon from Pokemon V and Pokemon GX. And there were a lot of decks, like at the time, it was very heavily skewed towards Pokemon V and Pokemon GX, that a lot of decks just didn't have the answer for this. And keep in mind, this is before canceling Cologne, and so it was a lot harder to turn this off. And even though its move Splitting Arrow didn't do a lot of damage, just not having a good answer to stop this did mean that this Decidueye card did win a decent amount and even won some tournaments here and there. Absolutely nuts. Last of the Pokemon that I wanted to bring up here, Golisopod. No one actually played, I don't think anyone played Golisopod straight up, but this would end up as a card in the Zoroark box decks where you'd transform into the Golisopod and then do some decent damage with Hard Time Slash. With trainer cards, some of these trainer cards are kind of late bloomers, like this big Parasol, which is really shining in the Lost Origin era of the game, where as long as the Pokemon in the active has the big Parasol on, you stop the effects of your opponent's attacks, such as Giratina's Star Requiem, such as Lost Mine and dropping the damage counters, the Regice moves that stops Pokemon V from attacking. You just cut all of that off, and Big Parasol has become one of the most popular techs in the Lost Origin era to stop all of those shenanigans. Birdkeeper is not your standard draw 3. It lets you draw 3 cards and switch your bench Pokemon with the active. And this is a Some decks run Bird Keeper. I mean, it's usually, I personally prefer Switch, but there are times where you want a Switch option that also lets you draw cards, and Bird Keeper was solid for that. Cape of Toughness, giving any Pokemon except Pokemon GX 50 HP. Also gave Pokemon V plus 50 HP. So if you were fighting, say, a Blissey V, which already had 250 HP, and you put the cape on it, it now had 300 HP, making it an absolute juggernaut. So this has been a popular card throughout for any deck that can take advantage of Cape of Toughness. Glimwood Tangle is not one of the most used stadiums, but for any deck that ran coin flips, this was pretty much essential, giving you potentially a second shot at flipping better if you needed to. Kabu is a supporter card that kind of came into power a little later. I feel like the advent of quad decks, something like a Dracozolt or a Metagross, where you're only playing one Pokemon on the active and that's it. Decks like that made really good use of Kabu, but I don't think we really saw those until a little later. I don't think at the time of Darkness Ablaze, people were really using this card, but please let me know if I'm wrong on that. Another big supporter from Darkness Ablaze was Piers, and this one was a really handy trainer. I personally like this card a lot when I play dark decks because it allows you to get a dark Pokemon. It doesn't specify that it can't be an evolution card. Plus, you can also get an energy as well, and it doesn't even specify dark energy. You can grab double turbos with this thing. You can grab hiding energy. It's a really handy card to have in a dark deck in particular. We also have to talk about Rose, and this was a very situational card. You can maybe use it in Urshifu, Rapid Strike Urshifu. You could use it with Rayquaza, but basically it allows you to attach 2 basic energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon VMAX. And for anything that was discarding energy, theoretically something like the Charizard, you could use this to get 2 energy back on, but it never really saw much play. At the very least, it definitely didn't see as much play as Rose Tower, which let you draw up till you had 3 cards in your hand. So it was like the Kricketune V, but as a stadium, and this was the go-to stadium for Mew VMAX decks. And I think Mew VMAX decks are going to miss this once rotation hits and this card goes away. Yellhorn was also here, which makes both Pokemon confused, and you might be wondering, why do you want to make both your Pokemon and your opponent's Pokemon confused? You would oftentimes do this if you had a way to get out of the confusion, whether you evolved your basic Pokemon to get the confusion away, or you use Scoop Up Net to get it out, but you would leave your opponent confused while also unconfusing yourself and attacking. And last but not least, we have some notable energy that came from Darkness Ablaze, including hiding energy that allowed dark Pokemon with it equipped to retreat for free. Really handy ability to have, especially for Eternatus, which was a very big, bulky Pokemon that was hard to move, and having hiding energy made it a lot easier to move around the board. And last but not least, powerful energy. It's colorless energy that gives your attacks 20 more damage. And I think this card is seeing more play now thanks to Regigigas and Blissey V. And this will probably have a home in the upcoming Lugia V-Star decks as well. All right, that is our look back, our retrospective of Darkness Ablaze. Are there any notable cards from Darkness Ablaze that I missed? Let me know in the comments. And before we go, some quick plugs. You can find me on all of the things, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can also find me on Twitch, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Would love to see you there. And last but not least, check out my website, inthirdperson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Later!